This video is to show how you can set up a Cortex so that when you control the Cortex mode, you also affect the flight mode, which in turn assigns just Expo. This was requested by a member who needed to be able to assign Expo to the different Cortex flight modes, but did not need dual rates. The easiest way to accomplish this is to simply tie a flight mode to the mode that the Cortex is in. For the way I'm doing this, I'm using switch E on the front of the DX9. I had to remap switch E so that it controls the gear channel if you're using a 6-channel receiver. If you're using a 7-channel receiver, you can simply leave channel E alone because it normally controls the aux2, and you would plug the gray Cortex wire into the aux2. I'll flip the switch here.
Flight mode 2. Flight mode 3.
As you can see, the LED is changing.
Flight mode 2. Flight mode 1.
So how we're going to accomplish this is, first we're going to go into the menu. We're going to go down. Into the system setup. We're going to come down here to the flight mode setup. And inside the flight mode setup, when you first come in here, it'll probably look like this: switch 1 inhibit, switch 2 inhibit. You're going to come down to switch 1, you're going to press the roller, you're going to have it flashing, and you're going to choose the switch that you want to use to control the Cortex mode. Again, in my case, I'm using switch E, so I simply move switch E, and then switch E will be highlighted. Go ahead, hit select, and then back. Just to verify, you can come in here and go into the next, and you'll just see the switch position 0 and then FLG, FLIG, FLIG. If you come down here and you press the select button, it'll start to flash, and then you can move the switch and you can see it's moving between the 3 different flight modes. Again, if you're using a 6-channel receiver, you have to come into your switch assignments, and you have to come down here to the gear channel, or whatever channel it is that you plugged the gray Cortex wire into, and map it to the switch that you're using for controlling the Cortex mode. Once that's done, that's all you need to do in this menu here. We can get back to the main screen. You come back in here, you can go into your dual rate and Expo menu. On the dual rate and Expo menu, you're going to come down and you're going to choose, instead of using the switch, which is what it is right now, you're going to come into this and select flight mode. And once you select flight mode,
Flight mode 2, flight mode 3, flight mode 2, flight mode 1.
as you see, when I roll the switch, it moves between flight mode 2, flight mode 3, and flight mode 1. And here's where you would simply adjust the amount of Expo that you want depending on each of the Cortex flight modes. As the Cortex manual states, you want lower Expo for the Cortex when it is on. This is due to the fact that it already kind of provides a little bit of Expo itself. If you have too much Expo, the Cortex will feel a little numb around the center of the sticks, and the plane will feel like it's not really wanting to follow your commands. But what in actuality is, you're using Expo, and then the Cortex itself applies a little bit of Expo, and it makes the plane feel pretty numb. So usually here, for the Cortex when it is on, I run half the amount of Expo that I normally would have run if I did not have the Cortex. So say on low rates I run a 35% Expo, I would knock that down to around 17 to 15%. If on high rates I run a 75% Expo, I would knock that down to say between 35 and 40%. So with that being said, example, we'll just take this to say 15 for the hold mode. Flip the switch down. And this is where I would normally fly with like 35% expo. Flip the
Flight
switch
mode
again,
3.
and this would be still low, but this is for rate mode, so I'll run it in 15%. So for the Cortex in rate mode, I have 15% here.
Flight mode 2.
Cortex is off. I have 35%, my normal amount of expo, like I would have if I didn't have the Cortex on.
Flight mode 1.
And then the hold mode, 15% again, half the amount I normally run. Now this is just a starting setting. If you find that with the Cortex on that is still feeling a little numb and you want it to be a little bit more crisp, come back in here and adjust the expo gain down. I've seen it where you can run the expo gain all the way down to 0 and the Cortex still handles pretty fine and the plane isn't overly sensitive. Now remember, you have to go and do this for each of your channels. So you come into the elevator, see the elevator still says switch. You come down to switch, roll over 1. It now is tied to the flight mode. You go in and you make the changes to your expo. Again, recommend starting with half of what you normally would use with the Cortex on, and then with the Cortex off, you put in what you want for the expo wise.
Flight mode 3. Flight mode 2. Flight mode 1. Flight mode 2. Flight mode 3.
Coming back up, coming back down to the last rudder channel, flight mode.
Flight mode 2. Flight mode 1.
So now, for all 3 channels, the rudder, the elevator, and ailerons, I have 15% expo when the Cortex is on in a rate or hold mode, and then 35% expo for when the Cortex is off, like I would for my normal setup on a plane without a Cortex.
Flight mode 3. Flight mode 2. Flight mode 1. Flight mode 2. Flight mode 3. Flight mode 2. Flight mode 1. Flight mode 2. Flight mode 3. Flight mode 2. Flight mode 1.
Again, this is a setup as requested by another RCG member who did not need dual rates and just simply wanted to be able to have some expo when the Cortex was off and little to no expo when the Cortex was on, just as the manual indicated. If you do need dual rates, please see my other video on how to create multiple flight modes that are tied together with 2 switches. Thank you very much.